Join us now on Sports Talk ATL. Mark Zinno for his weekly appearance. Mark, how you doing?
Gentlemen, happy Friday.
I
It's a very interesting time.
we said it last week, and I know we talked about the defensive coordinator opening that I think the very next day became a closed opening. We were talking about all these candidates. Oh, they might finally hire out of the circle of trust. And who is it? The same guy we said probably 2 or 3 weeks ago when it came open. It's Jeff Ulbrich, the guy who was the DC with Raheem Morris when they were interim. The Falcons going right back to the well. Mark, you had some good tweets about it. I want to hear your thoughts about the Jeff Ulbrich hiring.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think my tweet pretty much encapsulated my thoughts on the whole thing. It's kind of crazy. The myopic and insular nature of the Falcons organization, who is mired in groupthink to a point of toxic groupthink, like would not allow themselves to hire somebody outside of the organization, right? Like it wouldn't allow them to go counterculture and just go in the direction of somebody who is brand new to try to produce different results. So they go with what's familiar. They go with what they know. And this isn't necessarily a knock on Ulbrich. We can have reasonable conversations about how good he was here, how good he was in New York, and what that means. But, again, to quote Nick Saban, I've never been good at coaching bad players to be good, right? Like Nick Saban always says, I coach really good players really well. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. Like, there's not a lot of horses in the barn here on this defense that Jeff Ulbrich had in New York. And even that defense towards the end of the year sort of fell off a little bit. So I don't know what we're going to get here, but this was as typical as the Falcons are, and they seemingly can't get out of their own way. And yet they wonder why they can't get to the next level of success. It's just, beating your head against the wall.
Yeah, it's the same buzzwords, collaboration, groupthink is another way to put it. It's just this collaborative bullcrap that everybody saw coming, and they fooled me. They fooled me interviewing Wink Martindale and some of these guys outside of the circle. Just shame on me. Shame on me for even having a glimmer of hope that it was going to be somebody other than Ulbrich. It's like I haven't learned my lesson. I just keep touching the hot stove. I'm such a moron. Like, I don't know how I haven't learned.
It's not like they have a Rooney rule to satisfy. Like they could have just grabbed Ulbrich from the beginning and ended this whole thing. Like, why do you go through this whole process to hire somebody that you knew you were going to hire from the jump that was your leading candidate? Like, again,
how much could you really, decipher or wade through, sift through an hour and a half long Zoom? And that might be generous. It might be like 30 minutes of a Zoom with Wink Martindale where you're just like, hey, Wink, and he's just like, hey, guys. I mean, how much could you really learn based on like, he's not a three-piece suit guy, Arthur. We can't have this guy here. He doesn't wear three-piece suits. He doesn't smile well. No, can't have this guy. We don't know him. I mean, this was a sham interview. I mean, how much could you really learn from a 30-minute Zoom call? The only one that was in person was Steve Wilkes.
Mm-hmm.
They knew who they were hiring.
Yeah, I know. Again, it's tough pill to swallow for fans.
On the flip side, what I know we're upset with the Falcons process, but in a positive light about Ulbrich, he did coach under Robert Saleh, who's one of the bright defensive lines. He was calling plays for that Jets defense that had some success. And Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich, when they kind of took over this defense in 2020, they were an average unit with not a lot of talent. And when you're talking about a team that's not going to have a lot of talent, like you mentioned to start this, is there any kind of semblance of hope that these two can work out and make this group look a little bit like it did in 2020 when they took over for Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff?
I mean, again, a lot of this depends on what the roster looks like and, if they can draft and develop anybody. Like, I mean, if you want to try to find the silver lining here, like, is there an argument to say that even if you go back to, Dan Quinn's era, here when Ulbrich was here the first time as a linebackers coach, right? Before he was promoted. He developed some decent talent there for a short period of time. And maybe that's the cornerstone of what you're hoping that he'll do, is that he'll develop some of the young talent that they're going to bring in or would draft or whatever. I don't know. All I know is that you haven't drafted any high-level young talent on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't know what's out there in free agency, but I know that there are a lot of questions about the talent level on this defense and if it's any good. And, if you're asking Ulbrich to make chicken salad out of chicken, I just don't know that that's going to happen.
Well, I think Jimmy's and Joe's, in my opinion,
yes,
and I know you disagree with it to a certain extent, at least as far as Ryan Nielsen's, year in Atlanta proved. Jimmy's and Joe's always take precedent over X's and O's in this league, especially on the defensive side of the ball, So it didn't matter if Jesus H. Christ walked through the doors of Flowery Branch. Like, until we get some guys, specifically some guys who can pressure the quarterback, it's going to be the same song and dance. And I mean, I'm sure Jeff Ulbrich had a ton of success when he had a pass rush, and he probably sucked when he didn't have a pass rush, like every defensive coordinator. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. Get some guys. Maybe Arnold Ebiketie takes a step. Don't even talk to Judon. Find some guys. Maybe trade up in the draft for a game-changing rookie. We saw, it's very hard for a rookie pass rusher to kind of make an impact. Well, we saw plenty of them. Jared Verse was maybe the best pass rusher on that Rams team that featured several young, talented pass rushers. So
he's a defensive rookie of the year, Jared Verse.
Yep.
Well, and then if you even go 2 years down the line, I mean, Nolan Smith has been unbelievable for the Eagles. And then there was a few guys in this draft that I'm very interested. I know, Mark, you want to talk about the future of this organization as we dig a little deeper, because we do have some questions about having a lame duck, so to say, GM going into a year where he needs to happen. We saw what happened with Thomas Dimitroff. We're going to talk about that coming up after the break.